Let's just go back 10 years ago, 2015. Duke basketball sat atop the college basketball world as national champions.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome on into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. Thanks so much for making Locked On Blue Devils a part of your day each and every day, wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts or if you watch us on YouTube. So much we appreciate your support. Thank you for that. On Locked On Blue Devils today, we got to go back down memory lane. Brian Horace is with us, and we'll talk about the 2015 Duke basketball team that won it all and what similarities we might see between 2015 and the current team that Duke has this year. Again, if you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever it is that you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. The Apple Podcast platform, the algorithms love those written reviews. So if you could do that for us, I would greatly appreciate it. And again, if you're watching us on YouTube, thanks for being here. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this video, share it with your friends. We very much so appreciate your support. We're on X at LO_Blue Devils, and I'm there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. So let's bring him on into today's show. The aforementioned Brian Horace back with us once again. We got to talk about the 2015 team as we take a trip back down memory lane. What a victorious year it was for the Blue Devils to be atop of the college basketball world. How sweet it is, Brian.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite teams right there. There's just something about that team that I think everybody just endearing. I mean, they were as close as any team I think we've seen, from the recruits to the upperclassmen to, it's just definitely my favorite team of all time.
Yeah, so many people contributed to the Duke team that was in 2015, and we'll certainly get to that throughout our conversation today. We'll talk about just the general thoughts around this squad and then kind of how they made it happen in their run throughout the NCAA tournament. And then at the end, what similarities can we find between 2015 and this current Blue Devil team that, again, if they were to win it all this year, that means Duke would be the 2025 NCAA tournament champions. In 10 years is long enough. Let's go ahead and claim that next national title for this Duke squad. So when we look at 2015, as we set it up, going back down memory lane, we look at the offseason that was for the Blue Devils the year prior in March. What a heartbreaking finish to the year it was for a Duke team headlined by Jabari Parker and Rodney Hood, who were upset by Mercer in the first round of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, one of the more, I don't want to say embarrassing. Coach K would never call it an embarrassing loss, but it was definitely
it sucked. Yeah.
Yeah. No one expected it, and it was just one of those things. They ran into a buzzsaw, and I don't know. For me, that particular team never really got it, together. They never really felt great as a unit, and I think it was sort of almost like the island of misfit toys or whatever. It just didn't really click for that team, and they still had a pretty darn decent season. It's just defensively they were never really there for me. It just it was one of those anomaly Coach K teams. I don't really understand what happened.
Yeah, when you look at that squad and what took place following the game and the season to get into setting up this 2014-2015 college basketball season that culminates with Duke on top, I think regardless of the outcome in that Mercer game, the way things were heading, the way the college, not the college basketball, but the NBA was looking at the likes of Jabari Parker and Rodney Hood in particular, it felt like we knew that Duke was going to need to reload in some of those vital spots because those guys will be heading off to the NBA.
Without a doubt. I think that's, that was definitely something the coaching staff had to have, sort of on their minds. How are we building for next year? What can we take from this loss into this next season to make sure that it doesn't happen again?
And for this Duke team, when you look at that and you look at the returning pieces for the Blue Devils that season going into the following year, it starts with Quinn Cook in that conversation. wanting to come back to Duke. He's got his senior year in front of him and wanting to be a key leader and fixture for this Duke squad.
Exactly. I mean, he's a guy that battled injuries, didn't get the playing time that he necessarily wanted to begin with. And I think, I'm sure there were conversations coming into the year that, look, this is going to be a team that we need you to be the leader on. And, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to score the most points. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be, have the highest assist numbers, but we need you to be that vocal leader. And, he was, and he came back, he very well could have transferred. A lot of guys take that route when they don't, things don't pan out the way you want. But, Quinn stuck around and became that senior leader for this team.
For this Duke basketball team, you look at what they were able to do throughout the course of the season. They'd also have big moments from veteran players like Matt Jones, Emil Jefferson, Marshall Plumlee. Those guys had their high spots and bright spots throughout the course of the season, having played for Duke previously. It was a year in which Rashid Suleiman was coming back, and there were high expectations for what he would be able to do for Duke, and we'll get more on that in just a moment. But then we've got a freshman class that is set up to be one of the best that Duke had in quite some time. A notable recruitment where Tyus Jones and Jahlil Okafor let the world know we're going to the same school.
Yeah, that was one of the first real package deals that in college basketball recruiting, at least one of the more famous ones. I mean, and they believe they announced pretty much at almost the exact same time, and that was that's a day I can definitely remember both of them committing, and that was that was the starting of everything, and those were the building blocks.
How special for those guys to make a decision that, hey, we're going to go play at Duke. We want to win a national championship. We're going to get that done. But it's not just them. They also have two more freshmen that are really good players in Justice Winslow and then also Grayson Allen, what he was able to do for that Duke team, putting together that recruiting class as a whole, a really good unit that Duke had.
Without a doubt. I mean, being able to watch Grayson before he got to Duke, I think I watched him at the Nike Hoops Summit, and I was just like, this guy might be something. I mean, he might not be, the higher ranked recruit that we're bringing in, but he's got something. He's got a little fire in him and and some hops for sure.
So as we take a look at this Duke team and what they were able to do throughout the course of the year here on Locked On Blue Devils, we're taking a trip down memory lane, a team that's got expectations on them because Duke is written across the chest. That is always the case when you look at Mike Krzyzewski on the sidelines, who's got to be hungry himself after being eliminated in the first round of the tournament by Mercer. Going into the year with all these players kind of coming together, what do you remember about early in the season for this Duke basketball team, Brian?
I remember that if Jahlil Okafor got his hands on the basketball, it was going to be 2 points.
Yes.
I remember Tyus Jones being a lot more ready than I thought he was going to be. Coming in as a freshman guard, on a team with, an established veteran guard, he still stood out. And the fact that they didn't even lose a game till January.
Right.
I mean, this team they were just rocking and rolling to begin the season. And I was like, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This isn't last year.
No doubt.
These guys came in battle ready. This was one of the more ready freshman classes Duke has had in a long time.
Duke played the likes of Michigan State in the Champions Classic and then some non-conference games against Temple and Stanford in the Barclays Center as a part of the Coaches versus Cancer Classic, where they won that championship. And then they've got a couple of games in ACC play before they even feature their first loss. That would come on January 11th at NC State when Duke lost for the first time that season. Duke started the year 14-0, but in that start, their 8th game of the year, Duke is playing in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, and they're taking a trip to play at number 2 Wisconsin, the number 2 team in the country at the time. Duke is on the road taking on the Badgers. Little did we know this would be a title game preview, but what a classic college basketball game that was, as Duke has their first true road game with freshmen trying to set the tone, and they did just that.
Oh, I remember Tyus Jones being just a killer in that game. I mean, 22 points, 7 of 11 shooting, plus the 4 assists. He only had 1 turnover. I mean, he was Duke's everything at that particular point.
Without a doubt, made big-time plays there. Justice Winslow, I could think of a big dunk he had there. Jahlil Okafor, the big matchups that he had with Frank Kaminsky, who's getting All-American buzz, and rightfully so with what he was able to do for the Badgers throughout his career. A Wisconsin team that had been in the Final Four the year prior, and they were wanting to get back and see what they can do, ultimately hoping that they can win the national championship. Duke wins that game. Big-time win for the Blue Devils in that one to keep this thing rolling. And then we get into the month of December, and we get a look at a bit of roster shakeup for the Duke basketball team. When on December 14th, Mike Krzyzewski and Duke basketball granted Semi Ojeleye his release, his opportunity to transfer away from the program. This is way before the transfer portal comes into existence. And then a month later, at the end of January, we find out that Rasheed Suleiman is dismissed from the basketball team for off-the-court matters. So it's a Duke team, Brian, that now you just lost 2 scholarship players for a Mike Krzyzewski team who doesn't go very deep into his bench.
Yeah, and I remember that was a big concern. Is like, okay, well, is eight enough? And I think Coach K actually coined the phrase 8 is enough. And but it was definitely at the time, it was a big worry and a concern that, can you go through this, the bulk of this season with just 8 scholarship players? How the heck do you even practice?
Especially when Rasheed Suleiman was the player himself. I mean, wow, he made things happen. There were times throughout his career where Duke was looking for someone to kind of go to offensively. And I just remember the shifty player that he was, right?
Yeah, had a way of finishing on his
layup. Man.
Just,
to be a little bit undersized, not the strongest built player out there by any stretch of the imagination, and able to get things done. And you're thinking, wait a minute, what does this mean? He's not a part of the team. We're about to get into February and get down the stretch here and ACC play and that sort of thing. How does Duke kind of respond? And then Tyus Jones recently on the Brotherhood podcast with his current Suns teammates and Grayson Allen and Mason Plumlee, he always likes to think about that game that Duke had at Virginia, a road game. It's funny that Tyus Jones is the one to bring this game up because, man, he made some big-time plays for Duke down the stretch in that one.
Oh, without a doubt. I think that's when he was started to be known as Tyus Stones. I think that was about that time.
Yes, a big-time win that Duke had. On the road, College Game Day was there, 69-63. Tyus led the way with 17 points for Duke in that one. So they're able to work their way through the regular season, through the ACC itself. A really impressive performance for the Blue Devils throughout the course of that year. And then they get into the ACC tournament, and their stay in the Greensboro Coliseum is not as long as they would hope for it to be, as Duke, the number 2 seed in the ACC that year, lost in the semifinals to number 11 Notre Dame, who was on a run all the way to the title game. So an upset there for Duke, and we're kind of curious, how is this Duke team going to respond heading into the NCAA tournament? But, we always love winning the ACC tournament. So when you're upset like that, that one didn't leave the best taste in our mouths. And I remember being quite upset by that result, Brian.
Yeah. I mean, Mike Brey has always been, he's sort of had K's number on occasion, and he's, he was always a bit of a thorn in K's side ever since he got to Notre Dame. And, that one, and that Notre Dame team had some players. I mean, they were no slouch at all. I definitely remember Jerry and Grant being one of the guys that just, he had 13 points in that game.
Yeah.
High flyer, 7-7 from the free throw line. I think he, Vasturia, that's the name that I don't really bring up much anymore, but and Pat Connaughton, NBA player. So, and obviously Bonzie Colson.
Bonzie Colson is who I'm thinking of, man. Gosh.
Yeah, that's where he was in the ACC for about 15 years.
Yes. And made an impact every time he stepped on the floor, for sure.
Yeah, his arms were as long as his legs. And
yes. Yes, and made things happen. So tip of the cap to Notre Dame. They got it done. And so now it's a Duke team that's getting set for a tournament run, and they've got to reset. They've got to figure out a way in which they can get back in the win column. Today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils is brought to you by a new sponsor, TurboTax. This message is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20, TurboTax experts give you your taxes their undivided attentions while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You don't have to lift a finger, but you'll get a peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. TurboTax is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. They are a 1 seed going into the NCAA tournament. So credit to Duke for securing one of those spots with a 30-4 record going, or a 29-4 record going into the tournament.
Yep.
Their first round games were played in Charlotte. I was at the Robert Morris game with my family. Maybe I'm I'm at the 2010 tournament. I'm there in 2015. I got to get back is what I'm telling myself. But
get your tickets, man.
Exactly. A near 30-point victory for Duke over Robert Morris, and then a comfortable win over San Diego State in those first two rounds. Once again, going to the point, hey, not a lot of scares there in those first two rounds, which is good to see for Duke, a roster in which many of those players had just been upset by Mercer in that first round.
Yep, exactly. This was definitely what you want to see in the first two rounds. You want to be able to get through those games comfortably, and get your practices in between, and they handled their business.
Okay, so let's get to the Sweet 16. Duke's now playing in Houston. We're in the hometown of Justice Winslow, the star freshman for the Blue Devils. We've got a game against Utah. Duke wins 63-57. They play Gonzaga in the Elite Eight and win that one 66-52. These two games, what do you recall from them?
I remember Utah being uncomfortably close for me.
Yes.
But that Utah team had Jacob Poeltl. They had Kyle Kuzma on that team who didn't really play very much. But, I remember Poeltl had was 5 of 10, 10 points. He's a guy that, gave Duke a little bit of trouble. Brandon Taylor gave Duke a little bit of trouble as well. It was a great game. Again, you want to win them all by 30, but it's just not going to happen, especially once you get into those later rounds.
No doubt. Yeah. When you're tested like that, and it's a Duke team that had Justice Winslow stand tall, 21 points for the Blue Devils in that Utah game. He was 3 of 4 from 3-point range. And you could tell every replay at every kind of celebration that he had after shots being made, he loved the fact that he was in his hometown and nobody was going to stop him, man. Nobody was going to stop him.
People don't think of Winslow as being a really good 3-point shooter, but when he was at Duke, he was at 41% for the year. So
crazy to think about how productive he was being on the arc for Duke. That Gonzaga,
the physical defensive guy, but no,
right,
he was a shooter.
Right. All right. So Gonzaga, what comes to mind when you think about that game?
Always worried about Gonzaga. That game always worried me. Again, they had they had Kyle Wiltshire, who was the Kentucky guy. They had Domantas Sabonis. I mean, that team was they
coming
had
off the bench.
Yeah, exactly. But Wiltshire had 16 against Duke, and Byron Wesley, a name that I hadn't really thought of, had 10 points, went 2 for 3 from the free throw line, and almost shot 50% against Duke. So that was again uncomfortably close for me, but still a win. And at that point, you're starting to think, okay, hold on, this team might do something.
I'm thinking still to this day about Przemysl Karnowski, the 7'1" player that Gonzaga had on the interior, and how is this guy going to match up with Jahlil Okafor? Is Big Ja going to be able to hold his own? Spoiler alert, he was, and Duke's able to take care of business. On to the Final Four, and it's Duke versus Michigan State, a matchup we've seen so frequently. Grayson Allen makes some big-time plays.
Oh,
a big dunk going baseline is
That
what
dunk
comes
was
to
amazing.
mind for me. What else are you thinking about with that Michigan State game?
Just that I expected Michigan State to put up a bit more of a fight in that game. I mean, they had Denzel Valentine, Travis Trice,
Yeah.
Lou Rawls-Nairn. They had a lot of guys on that team, a lot of like really good players. And, you know, for Duke to be able to win by 20, I think it was.
20. We 20-pieced them. Yep.
That was shocking to me. And I was like, okay, this is definitely has an air of destiny to it.
No doubt. And Duke picks up a big win as they make their way into the national title game. On the other side of the bracket, you're seeing a Kentucky team that everyone wants to talk about. Kentucky. They had not lost a game all season long. And then Wisconsin, a team that Duke had already played and beaten this season, upsets Kentucky. And now it's going to be Duke and Wisconsin for a chance to win a national title. What a matchup.
Yeah, I remember I think it was some of the Kentucky guys were saying that they completely overlooked Wisconsin because they really wanted to play Duke, and that was all that they thought about. And I think that ended up costing them because honestly, looking back, they should have beat Wisconsin. I don't know if it was a failure of coaching or preparation, but I don't think anyone had picked Wisconsin to win that game.
Without a doubt. Wisconsin, in their history, they won the NCAA tournament all the way back in 1941. I'm sure everybody remembers the 41 Badgers.
It's back when I was young.
Yeah, exactly. But here they are in a big stage with a chance to win a national title going up against Duke. They're back in the Final Four. They just beat Kentucky. They feel like the world is in front of them. They've got this opportunity to knock off the Blue Devils and win the national title. And you want to talk about pacing back and forth throughout the course of the game. That's how every Duke fan felt as this game unfolded.
It was a classic game. I mean, it was just, no team really got the edge, for very long in this matchup. And it was back and forth. And it was, again, high-level basketball. You got the, Wisconsin's brand of basketball was completely different than Duke's brand of basketball, but somehow they both met in the middle. And it was a beautiful game to watch.
Not much separation in this game. It was tied at 31 once we got to halftime, and Grayson Allen is able to come off the bench. Again, 8 is enough, and play after play, Grayson Allen is able to fire this Duke team up. There's the famous image of him kind of flexing after he makes the big save to give Duke possession back on the defensive end of the floor. And Tyus Stones-Jones leading the way with 23 points for Duke, stands tall at the end of it with a big kind of ice-clinching three-point shot that he made at the top of the key.
Yeah, I guarantee you, out of all the players on that Duke sideline, he was the one that Wisconsin did not prepare for.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that. And to have him come out and drop in 16 points and go 5 for 5 from the free throw line after really being sort of a guy that didn't play very much during the season.
Yep.
But, when it was time, he was there and he was ready. And he had, I'd heard all season about how he was the guy that nobody wanted to play against in practice. Nobody wanted to have him guard them in practice. And it made you wonder why. But I think Justice Winslow called him a dog. Like that was, he's a dog. I don't want to play against him. He's a dog. And I think Wisconsin found out exactly what that meant.
Today's show of Locked On Blue Devils is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are here, and they're better than ever with FanDuel. All the excitement gets started tomorrow with the wild card round kicking off in the National Football League. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, a sportsbook partner, a proud sponsor of the NFL, and a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Duke is the king of the dance in 2015. We're going back down memory lane here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. JJ Jackson joined today by Brian Horace at Duke Blogger. So I want to talk about the similarities that are out there as we turn it to today's day and age. First off, 10 years is too long. Like we need this to be the year that we're finally able to get back atop the college basketball world. So with that in mind, as we frame this question, what similarities do you see between this year's Duke team and that 2015 team that won the title?
Okay, well, a couple of things. First one is I don't think you get to where that team got to without upperclassmen. And I think that is what this team and that team had. You know, there's a commonality there in that, yes, you have high-level freshmen leading the way in terms of maybe statistical, things, but you have guys like, for that team, you had Emil Jefferson, you had Marshall Plumlee, and obviously you had Quinn Cook really being the sort of vocal leaders of that team.
Yep.
And I think here in this season, we have Sion James, we have Malik Brown, we have Mason Gillis. Now, those guys aren't always the biggest stat producers, but if you talk to any of the younger guys on the team, they give credit to those older guys for really showing them the way and being vocal leaders. And you see it in the huddles. You see it on the court. They're the first to go over to guys and say, hey, you need to be here. This is where you need to be. So I think having those upperclassmen that provide, leadership on the court, but also in the huddle, those are huge things.
Undoubtedly huge for what this Duke team has this year. I think to go further on the freshmen, right, and you've got these players that are making headlines every time they step the floor. That's what the basketball world was doing with Jahlil Okafor as he gets set to go off to the NBA following that national championship in 2015. And Cooper Flagg is destined for greatness at the next level with this Duke team. And those guys leading the charge all season long for Duke. Hopefully Flagg is able to do that. And then beyond that, freshmen making an impact. You've got Justice Winslow and Tyus Jones bound for the league after a season. Like we're seeing right now, all the hype in the world from NBA scouts and executives surrounding Common Malawach and Con Knipple, and a couple of other guys could be on draft radars in the days and weeks to come. When you look at this Duke basketball team, the freshmen really kind of leaving their imprint on Duke this year.
Exactly. But you also have the older guys who are okay with that.
Yes.
It's one thing to just be an older guy on a team. It's another thing to be an older guy knowing that you're not going to be the ones grabbing the headlines. And I think you have to be able to meld those two types of personalities, the high-level freshmen, but also the guys that know that, okay, well, I might not be getting the headlines, but I know that I'm an integral part of this team and they need me.
All right, so let's get into ACC play. Let's see if this Duke team is able to continue to take care of business within the league itself, and hopefully they can end that 10-year drought that we've had as we took a trip back down memory lane today with Duke, looking at that 2015 title team. Brian, the time is always so greatly appreciated. I want to make sure, though, that people check out all of your work. Where can they find it? How can they best support you?
Yes, sir. On X, find me at Duke Blogger. Feel free to come in, have a conversation. We'll talk about whatever. Hit me up on Blue Sky at dukeblogger.com and my website, dukeblogger.com.
All right. Thanks for the time, Brian. We'll do it again soon, okay?
Yes, sir. Take care.
All right. That's Brian Horace joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Appreciate his thoughts and insight, as always, for joining us here on the program. And yeah, it's been 10 years too long. Let's get back to the top of the college basketball world. Thanks for your support. As always, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And once again, be sure to follow us on X at LO_Blue Devils. Listen to us wherever it is that you get your podcast. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you again soon. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.